Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. One of the biggest days in Formula 1 history in many respects, with Adrian Newey, the most successful designer in the history of the sport, officially joining a new team. He's had a career at Williams, he's had a career at McLaren, he's had a career at Red Bull for the last 2 decades or so. Now Aston Martin is the new challenge. Lots of controversy as a result. Is this the right move? Does it make sense given the massive package they've offered Newey to join? Is this the team that could seriously fight for World Championship contention over the next couple of seasons? Or is there more to it than that? And exactly why did Newey not decide to go to Ferrari when certainly conversations were had? Newey and other rumours talking about his perspective on why he turned down the option at Maranello. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Plenty of course we're going to get into today. Not least the Newey stuff, but there's a few other pieces as well. Gabriel Bortoleto is said to be the favourite now to get the remaining Sauber seat. It's either Bottas or it's Bortoleto. Bortoleto had one of those drives last weekend's at the Monza Grand Prix. He went from 22nd on the grid to first. Now, helped massively, to be fair, by, the safety car timing and all that type of stuff. But nonetheless, that's one of those moments that just gets you noticed and therefore people, take a note of, right? I mean, it's one of those drives that people say, wow, he went from last to first. And even though the context is a bit muddled, he was great that weekend, to be fair, in the sprint and then certainly in the feature, and he deserved the result. Obviously, there was some luck involved, but it's one of those results where if you're Bottas, you're thinking, damn, this guy, started last on the grid and won it due to some luck, and now it's going to cost me my seat potentially. Bottas was even in the media today saying that people have short memories when it comes down to what he's achieved in his career. This another unfortunate one, Zach O'Sullivan, who was one of Williams' driver options to potentially replace Sargent, right? It was Colapinto, it was potentially Zach O'Sullivan. They went with Colapinto, and O'Sullivan is no longer going to be there because they've got funding issues. Super sad to see in many respects that it's still a massive part of, racing and the Formula Series in general, that you just need money to make it work. And like Colapinto, we've seen what he's done in Monza, very impressive, but he also had like 5 million worth of Argentinian dollars coming his way to help that transition into the team. That's not been the case with O'Sullivan, and therefore he's not going to be in their lineup much longer, unfortunately. A couple of other things on the driver market. Kim Illman, of course, photographer, influencer, whatever you want to say, in the world of Formula 1. And he gives his perspective on his theories as to what's going to happen in the driver market from now until 2025. He's pretty well connected, Kim Illman, and he's heard a few things that have turned out to be true shortly afterwards. Of course, he actually announced the Jack Doohan to Alpine thing before it was official, and then he quickly removed that from the timeline. But this is his prediction on what's going to happen. He reckons that Daniel is going to replace Perez, as in Ricciardo replacing Perez at Red Bull. Then Lawson will come into V-Carb, replacing Ricciardo. This seems actually really rather likely. I mean, Helmut Marko has made it very evident that Lawson is getting a drive next year, so there's only really one option for how that works, which is Lawson to RB and Ricciardo to Red Bull replacing Perez. And his prediction is that Bottas will retain the seat alongside Hülkenberg. So even though rumour has it that maybe Bortoleto is currently the marginal favourite. Another big story of the day as well is that the wind tunnel of Ferrari is soon operational again. You guys might remember over the summer break, they actually took it offline to work on some upgrades on their wind tunnel to improve it. And it's not been operational now for a good few weeks. So it's going to be back in business soon, which is obviously important for their progression, certainly towards next year. They've got a front wing in the works for Austin as well, and there's no upgrades in Azerbaijan because everything was brought further forward. So it's interesting, right, upgrading a wind tunnel mid-season, because then you've got to calibrate some of the changes, and I'm sure there's a bit of work involved there. If it works as intended, it should make them a stronger team and a stronger engineering outfit. If it doesn't, then of course there are questions on whether it's actually going to set them back to a certain degree, and that seems relatively unlikely. But let's talk about the Newey stuff, and I think it's incredible to see that an engineer, and it's really cool, I think, like Formula 1 does this as a sport, because Newey is going to become on this probably the highest paid non-athlete in the entirety of sport, certainly in the UK, and certainly in motorsport that is the case. And although the guys driving the cars are heroes in many respects, the real, talent in the sport in many respects is designing the cars, and everyone knows that watches the sport, the car is the most important thing, and then the driver. People over the last couple of years might have debated that and said, oh, well, Max is making the difference. Look, as good as Max is, and he's phenomenal, there's no doubt, if he's not in a car that's capable capable of winning a race, then he's not going to be able to win the race. And we've seen that over the last few rounds with the way the Red Bull has gone. That's just how it is. The car comes first, then the driver has its importance as well, obviously, in the mix. But there's a good reason why the likes of Adrian Newey are considered to be the most valuable men, if not the most valuable man in the entirety of Formula One. And there's a good reason why Aston Martin have done everything to secure his services. And this is a video they put together, right? It's pretty rare to see anything like this from a team. And it's kind of like a hype video, like a teaser trailer for Newey. And here he is kind of designing things. And actually, when they reveal the full version of this, you can see that he's drawn the Aston Martin logo, and underneath that he's written Adrian Newey. And that's how they officially announce it today. So, look, this has been rumoured for some time. But still, the announcement and the extent of the announcements is still pretty remarkable. And there's been lots of talk as to whether this is a good or a bad move in general. I think it's worth remembering when Adrian Newey joined Red Bull, as they were a very long time ago now, they'd come over from Jaguar. They were considered to be a massive outsider, a massive risk, a massive challenge for a guy like Newey to go and join. And people that are saying, oh, Newey's like bag chasing or whatever, you know, you can make the same argument back then. Red Bull were coming in with some money, they were coming in with some commitment, and, you know, they were considered to be the laughingstock in many respects of the entire grid. Didn't take long for Newey to start designing championship-winning cars for Red Bull, and of course the rest since then is history, right? So, you know, don't count Aston Martin's future out, especially because their resources are arguably far greater than what Red Bull had when Newey joined them a couple of decades ago. And Aston Martin's resources, their factory, their facilities are no doubt on par with the absolute best teams in Formula One right now. With Newey's services on board, you can definitely see why it's a compelling prospect. But there's other reasons as well. Lawrence Stroll confirmed, just as the broadcast started, that Newey is joining as their kind of chief technical partner, I think is what they call him. We'll discuss that here in a second. But he's also joining with equity, right? He's a shareholder of the team, which is something that probably no one else could actually offer, right? And it's one of those deal sweeteners, which just makes so much sense. It makes sure that the motives are aligned for Newey and the team to ensure that it's not just money that he's getting paid, but some of that money is getting paid in stock of the team. And, you know, that's an incredibly compelling prospect, right? And it seems like Lance Stroll and Newey's vision for how to orchestrate the team was, you know, critical to coming up with this partnership. And even Lawrence Stroll said at one point in the kind of the interview broadcast thing that they did, that he was asked the question, okay, how are you going to kind of structure the technical team? And he said, look, that's Adrian's job. Adrian knows much better than I do about how to make a championship successful winning engineering outfit. That's what he's going to do. The other thing for Newey is that he is joining on a full-time basis. He's going to be working in the factory, in his office, you know, 5 days a week, every single day, which is not what he currently does at Red Bull. You know, well, not anymore, obviously, right? But he's worked kind of remotely. Andrew Benson from the BBC said in the interview, kind of the media conference, as it were, that, you know, maybe Newey only works 3 days a week. And Newey, don't know where that idea came from, but effectively he did imply that, yeah, he's not working full-time there on the Red Bull operation anymore, but he will be for Aston Martin. And he said, like, that's what I think is best and necessary to get this team where it needs to be in order to win. And Newey was also very clear on his level of competitiveness. You know, Frank Williams kind of called him, a long time ago now, but one of the most, if not the most competitive men in the paddock. And Newey kind of responded to that statement and said, look, I wouldn't go that far because Lance and Lawrence and Fernando obviously are right up there as well. But he absolutely wants to win and puts a lot of pressure on himself to perform at a high level and deliver some incredible results. So some remarkable pictures really coming out of this today. And it is incredible to think about that it wasn't that long ago, back in May, where there were rumours, even according to the Daily Mail and others, that this Newey deal was done to Ferrari, that the terms had been agreed. They'd met with, you know, Fred Vasseur and everything. And there was a good possibility that got locked in the very near future. That never happened. There's been some rumours as to why. And even in July, the man of the moment in many respects in Jeremy Clarkson was giving his comments, and he said to Dutch media that Newey, who's a good friend of Clarkson's, is house hunting in Oxfordshire, not in Maranello. So, you know, it turned out Clarkson knew what was happening here all along. But, you know, we've got to talk about some of the reaction to this, of course, and what it means for the future of the sport, because it's just a massive moment, and it's actually incredibly exciting, I think, that Newey has decided to join a team that's not one of the top four. I mean, he could have gone to potentially a Mercedes, a McLaren, or a Ferrari, and probably those teams at least had a word. Ferrari most certainly did, but he's chosen to go to, you know, the team currently fifth in the championship with the intention to bring them up up to the top over the next couple of years. Very exciting prospect for Formula One that we could have like genuinely another team in serious contention here. Does make you wonder about the likes of Dan Fallows, who worked previously with Newey and joined Red Bull joined from Red Bull a couple of years ago, but he's going to be Newey, the managing technical partner. So effectively he's the top dog. He's going to make all the decisions with how the technical team is structured, and he's going to lead up the team. And I think that is probably something that he wanted to do, and also that Ferrari were not so keen on allowing, right? Like, they have their politics, they have their technical structure, they weren't so keen on Newey ripping up the book, as it were, which is understandable. But if you're Aston Martin, where they currently are, floundering a little bit, and sure, they've not been able to utilise all their new facilities they have over the last couple of years in their development trajectory, but it's quite clear that Newey will not only have the power to make the changes he feels necessary, but also Lawrence Stroll is very much happy for him to do so. He wants someone to come in and say, okay, we're going to do it like this, and that's going to be leading to championship success, in addition to the fact that he's actually going to design the car, which is also pretty useful. Given his tenure in the sport, he also revealed that it was the Suzuka weekend, the Japanese Grand Prix weekend, right back at the start of the season, really. That was when he made his decision that he was going to leave Red Bull, search for a new challenge, which of course was not long after all of the Christian Horner stuff was coming to light, right? So I'm sure that had some part to play, but he did confirm it was that weekend, and then a couple of weekends later in Miami, that's of course when it became official. But Newey, of course, giving his thoughts on the situation, talking about Lawrence actually being a key feature as to why, and he made an interesting comment, I think, on Lawrence Stroll, saying that he's one of the only, if not the only, team owner that is like directly invested and very heavily invested so in the, and engaged in the sport. Lawrence is determined to create a world-beating team. He is the only majority team owner, because of course Toto Wolff is a team owner but not majority, who's actively engaged in the sport, going on to say that they now have all the resources. I think it was in maybe June, or there were some rumours that Newey had gone to visit the factory, and what he'd seen had very much so impressed him, right? And even Newey said that he'd gone to see other factories, and like new factories, maybe this year or over the last couple of years, that he'd thought, well, it's okay, but it's not perfect in many respects. He said he was very, very impressed with the facilities, like the setup of the facilities, the way that it's all organised, almost like geographically, with the way that it's set out in the building itself. And he says, look, they've got everything they need. They've got the brand new state-of-the-art wind tunnel. They've got the massive factory and facilities they've built over the last few years. So, Aston now they've not been able to use this for the last couple of years, but they now have all of the infrastructure that a top team has, and now they have Adrian Newey as well. So, they've got all the pieces, there's no doubt about it. And obviously people might debate, is Newey going to be washed up? Is he going to be as good as he was before? I mean, there's no real evidence to suggest that he isn't, given what he's done over the last couple of years in certainly the ground effect era of regulations, and ground effect ain't going away. It's still there in 2026. Of course, there is some questions, though, on whether the engine rules are actually going to be more important than the aero, as in the engine will determine more of car performance than the aero will in 2026. So if that's the case, then maybe, Newey's the right man, but he's at the wrong time in some respects if the engine is really the important thing. But as Newey went on to say himself, he's working with Honda again, the same guys that he's worked with at Red Bull for the last few years and had loads of success with in terms of setting up that power unit, and arguably Honda have been the best over the last, let's say, 3 to 4 years on their electrical side, on their power unit deployment side, and that is now 50% of the engine rather than 15%. So, they definitely have a lot of reasons to be optimistic, Aston Martin, and there's many a reason why Lawrence Stroll had a massive smile on his face at this press conference. But people were wondering, right, what did Newey think about the whole Ferrari situation? He actually basically said, look, he's 100% committed to Formula One and chose Aston Martin over Ferrari. And there's been a couple of reasons potentially rumoured as to why, some from the Ferrari side, but also just, I think it makes a lot of sense, really, like this Aston Martin deal. As I say, they're facilities are going to be at Ferrari level, right? At Mercedes level, at McLaren level, based on what they've recently done. And he said that he'd had conversations with other teams. I think even the quote was here: I was very flattered by the number of teams that did approach me, and I had some discussions with some of those teams, but not all of them, he says. So, which is a little bit juicy in a way. I think he was actually asked the question specifically that he responded to this with, because I watched the press conference this morning, and he was asked, like, what about Ferrari? Why didn't you join? And he didn't go into, like, specific detail on the Ferrari situation, but he did say and drop a little bit of intel that some of the teams that approached me didn't even talk to. So maybe Audi or Williams, or maybe you talk to Williams, I don't know. But that obviously would bring the challenge element that Newey is certainly seeking, and made that quite clear. But Williams wouldn't have the resources that Aston Martin have access to. And also, given that he wants to join a team and work probably on the team on a full-time capacity to make them as good as he thinks that he can make them and needs them to be, Ferrari would have been tricky, right? Moving to Maranello, learning Italian, right? And, he's 65 years old. So working in the UK on the British Isles and having short journeys into the factory makes a lot of sense. And, Newey wants to work more intensively at the office. At Ferrari, he, could have gotten used to a whole new culture, but that obviously would have been a challenge on some respects. And I think it just makes more sense. The people that he's working with, the language that he's speaking, and the fact that Ferrari apparently didn't want to get into a bidding war with Aston Martin because, they'd have paid more. I mean, Lawrence Stroll said that he thinks that Newey was a bargain, and he's paying him probably £150 million worth over the next 5 years, probably including stock and all this that's happening as well. But, I think there's a few reasons why Ferrari would have had to make a very compelling offer to make it more attractive than this Aston Martin situation. And even Fred Vasseur made the comment as well to say that, his ideas on how he wanted to work and maybe manage the team were different to what Vasseur was thinking, and therefore they decided just maybe collectively not to come to an agreement, right? So I think you look at it in hindsight, you can see a lot of reason why this makes a lot of sense, to be honest, in both parties. And it does just create a very interesting dynamic, doesn't it? Because Fernando Alonso is still there. He is not going away. And in 2025, Newey isn't even there yet, right? So he joins on the 2nd of March, 2025. So it's not like he's joining immediately. He actually joins basically when next season starts, and he joins a couple of months after the teams are allowed to start working on the new regulations. I'm sure that remotely he will be able to contribute to some degree, but he's officially in the office from like the 1st of March basically, and that's when he works with these guys. So next year's car isn't a Newey car. The 2026 car, however, is, and Alonso, according to, the contract that he has, will still be driving that, as, of course, will Lawrence Stroll. Even I thought it was quite nice for Newey to comment on Alonso and saying that he nearly joined the team in 2009, but for many years, he's been an arch-enemy of Adrian Newey and what Alonso's been able to achieve. So, looking forward to seeing them two together, and it would be incredible, right, to see how, these guys are going to get along together. And also it raises questions for the future of the team, because I'm not going to lie, it does give Max Verstappen another legitimate option if he does want to leave Red Bull. Mercedes are certainly a legitimate option. Toto Wolff would take him at a heartbeat, no question, and Mercedes are still Mercedes, although they haven't been themselves for the last couple of years, but they're getting there slowly, I think, this season with a few race wins to their name. But now Aston is a legitimate option, right? You've got the Honda engine, you've got Newey over there, you've got all the funding and the resources and the facilities in the world. Like, there's no reason why Aston Martin can't become a championship-winning team over the next few years. Clearly, Newey sees it, and, others potentially see it as well. Maybe Max. So, it looks weird, doesn't it? I'm not going to lie, it looks strange, but it's not completely out of the realms of possibility, right? Obviously, Red Bull is going into this double header, the Baku-Singapore weekends, kind of, trying to find a way to survive against McLaren. We'll see if they're able to achieve that. And also, they will have to be fighting for sure against Charles Leclerc, because the last time that he wasn't on pole in Baku was now 5 years ago. They didn't race in 2020, but in 21, in 22, in 23, Leclerc has been on pole on all of those occasions. So, he's very good around here. The Ferrari was good last weekend as well. Even when the Red Bull was a pretty dominant machine around here for the last couple of years, he was still able to stick it on pole, even last year by a very marginal margin. And even in the sprint race, I think he did the same thing before, unfortunately getting past on both occasions anyway. But yeah, what a fascinating season that we have had. This was, predicted and known about for some time, but some of these other things most certainly weren't. And yeah, what a season for Formula One drama. And yes, we might not hear much from Newey now for the next 6 months until he starts working there, but the reality is that in the medium to longer term, it's just an incredibly, I think, exciting day for the sport. So very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.